online and offline, and colleagues. Thank you very much for taking your time from your busy schedule to attend this meeting. I'm Yu Xiaohui from GIZ. So I think this seminar will focus on the operation of Chinese companies operating overseas. So when we have colleagues here in this meeting room, they can represent how much attention we pay to the Chinese enterprises operating overseas. And I'm happy to see that you have taken off your masks and show your faces here. I believe this also represents our spirit of seeking truth. So I would like to first introduce the agenda for today. We will have representatives from Chinese enterprises and Chinese Industrial Association. And we'll also have the leader of TAC to deliver speech. We will listen to the survey report and listen to the voice of frontline companies and industrial association. We also have enough time to have panel discussion. And our online participants will also be our panelists. So without further ado, I would like to invite Yan Yan, Director of Office for Social Responsibility, China National Textile and Apparel Council, Deputy Director of China Textile Information Center, to deliver an opening speech. Dear colleagues and friends, good afternoon. To a lot of colleagues and friends, we haven't met for a long time, as Yu Xiaohui said. We've had 1.5 years during the pandemic, which was not so easy to endure. A lot of the colleagues came here with masks and didn't show their faces. But today, we are very glad to see that everyone can talk to one another by showing their faces. Because on the one hand, China has achieved progress in the pandemic prevention and control. And secondly, we are very happy to gather together to look out to the future. And today we are going to launch the survey report on the impact of the pandemic to the Chinese enterprises overseas. So this is also a way to look out to the future. In the past year or so, the pandemic has severely affected all walks of life, especially the manufacturing industry, and the textile industry has also suffered greatly. Nevertheless, China's textile and apparel industry still shows strong resilience and vitality. In the first quarter of last year, with the joint efforts of the government, industrial organizations, and enterprises, we have overcome difficulties and took the lead in resuming production, ensuring the supply of global protective materials and contributing to the prevention and control of the pandemic. We made contributions and got extensive attention in the world. Especially in the past year, the industry's production has maintained a steady recovery. The domestic demand has continued to recover and the export has accelerated. This has played an important role in maintaining the stability of the global textile and apparel supply chain and rebuilding the industry's investment confidence. For the global textile supply chain, the pandemic has presented a huge test, not only reflecting the pandemic control and prevention policies, and the social coordination capabilities of the country where the industrial chain is located, but also showing the comprehensive ability of manufacturers to respond to public health emergencies and the subsequent chain reaction. In Southeast Asia and Africa, the two key areas for overseas investment of China's textile and apparel industry, the difficulties and the challenges faced by Chinese companies are different from those from domestic ones. They are determined by different social policies and economic backgrounds, and also affected by their role and positioning in the industrial chain. The performance of overseas Chinese enterprises in response to the pandemic, in marketing, production, operation, and fulfillment of social responsibilities is worthy of our exploration and research. So the Office for Social Responsibility of CNTAC, together with GIZ, carried out this survey report project, hoping to gain insight into the good experience of overseas Chinese invested companies in response to the pandemic, as well as the demands of different stakeholders. And based on the findings, we can suggest the industrial chain take corresponding actions to jointly promote the industrial chain recovery and sustainable development. With the pandemic, the textile and apparel industry needs to adapt to a series of brand new changes. These changes include the deconstruction and the reorganization of global resources, the transformation of product and service models, and the further sinking of digital technology in economic and production. More sustainable production and also need a more sustainable lifestyle. Green recovery has become an important choice for the economy, especially the textile and apparel industry. So our companies should pay special attention to quality and efficiency, technological innovation, and people-oriented strategy. In particular, they should take people as the core resource of the company, take social responsibility more seriously, and better unite everyone so that we can overcome difficulties together. Recovery is the common expectation of all countries in the world, but the road to recovery is not smooth. Whether it's a vaccine supply, pandemic control and prevention policies, or economic and industrial policies, there are a lot of risks of differentiation that may occur among different countries and various industrial sectors, which will aggravate the uncertainty. Therefore, we should pay more attention to the importance of cooperation, strengthen our collaboration, and adhere to mutual benefit and win-win so that we can transform this challenge into opportunities. In April 2020, CNTAC and 9 industrial organizations from 6 countries of the Sustainable Asian Textile Network jointly issued a statement calling for the implementation of responsible sourcing practices during the pandemic, pointing out that the global textile and apparel supply chain of those large brands and retailers and traders should take responsible sourcing behaviors. In January 2021, 4 textile and apparel industry organizations from 3 other countries and 9 organizations in STAR, that is 13 industrial organizations around the world jointly launched the Sustainable Terms of Trade Initiative, calling on supply chain buyers and suppliers to strengthen and optimize cooperation to jointly support the economic and industrial recovery. In particular, these industrial organizations, which represent more than 70% of global apparel exports, have jointly agreed on the core recommendations that downstream buyers cannot overcome in the field of procurement, clarify the standards, and continuously improve the procurement practices. These recommendations and initiatives have received strong support from OECD, the International Labour Organization, the International Organization of Employers, and the International Trade Union Organization. Not long ago, the white paper on these recommendations and initiatives was published. In the future, we will work with the international community to work hard to promote the adoption of these commercial compliance recommendations and standards. We believe that this will lay a new foundation of cooperation for building a more mutually beneficial, resilient, and sustainable global textile and apparel supply chain. The Office for Social Responsibility of CNTAC will continue to keep an open mind and actively explore cooperation with different parties in the industrial chain. We also thank all the partners for their understanding and support. Hope in the future we can work closely to build a sustainable supply chain around the world. I wish this seminar a full success. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Yan, for your opening speech. I know that Ms. Yan has always been very passionate. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Mark Beckman, Project Director of Fabric, GIZ, to deliver a speech. Mark, please.
Yes, thank you. Dear Ms. Yan, colleagues from industry associations, online and in-person participants, a very good afternoon to Shanghai and from wherever you are in the world, from Phnom Penh, Cambodia. I'm very happy to be invited for this opening speech, and thank you very much to all participants for sharing their time here. There's a long history on social responsibility in the textile and garment industry, and both SINTEC and GIZ have been actively involved in the discussion on the topics such as labor disputes, rights of vulnerable groups, occupational health and safety, and engagement with local communities. During the past decade, the voices from leading Chinese companies and associations have been heard more often, both domestically and internationally. SINTEC's CSC 9000T encourages Chinese industrial participants to proactively communicate their sustainability management and performance data to stakeholders. China plays a key role in the textile and garment industry in Asia, not just as the main producer and exporter, but also as the main investor in other countries such as Myanmar or Cambodia, where I am based. Thus, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, we felt it would be well worth exploring on how Chinese invested overseas companies have been affected. The SINTEC study, which is led by Dr. Liang Xiaohui and supported by our GIZ Fabric project, outlines some of the main developments regarding this. GIZ Fabric, as a regional project, aims to foster regional exchange and regional cooperation for more sustainable business practices in Asia. We work on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in 6 countries in Asia, in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and with China. We have been implementing a physical conference series, the Asian Dialogues for Sustainability, for many years in the region. But based on this experience and in response to the COVID-19, we started this online seminar series, Getting Through the Crisis Together, in April last year. Each session sheds light on different aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic impact on the textile and garment industry, especially regarding the implications on production in Asia. We wanted to offer an opportunity for stakeholders in the industry to exchange on good practices, example of dealing with crisis, and on lessons, excuse me, we can take on how to make this industry more resilient. In this series and in general, in the work of the GIZ Fabric project, we have been working closely with different stakeholders in the field. Many Chinese invested factories such as Crystal, Regina Miracle, Taekong, and Eskel have sent their representatives to participate in our sustainability training programs in Asian countries. The Fabric project with its various activities provides platforms as well as thematic initiatives to support the sustainability endeavors of manufacturers in Asia. But we don't only work with manufacturers, we also collaborate closely with international brands, industry associations, civil society, and government agencies. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank all online and in-person participants of this event, especially our dear panelists. I would like to invite you to share your understanding and reflections on how Chinese invested companies in Asian region could be more active and participate in the process of redefining the concept of social and environmental responsibility, so that we all learn from each other and better understand which stakeholder needs which type of support to make textile and garment production in Asia more sustainable. The COVID-19 pandemic's impact may feel temporary, and especially in China, I believe, but it forces businesses to rethink their business model and how they make a profit. It is also a test on the textile industry risk and business resilience. At the same time, a number of governments in buying markets such as Germany are tightening their due diligence regulations. And as many of you know, the new German due diligence law will come into effect January 1st, 2023, and it will be applicable to all producers globally who sell to Germany, directly or indirectly. So it will also have a major influence on many suppliers in China. GIZ Fabric and further projects of the German Development Corporation are here to share industrial expertise, knowledge products, management resources to support you. So please feel free to reach out to me or our local colleagues in Cambodia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Myanmar, and China. For in-person participants in Shanghai, we are having Ms. Alexandra Behns, our coordinator of regional cooperation, and Mr. Andy Yu, technical advisor, with you today. They would be more than happy to answer your questions, discuss any topics of your concern, and explore further collaboration opportunities with you. Finally, I would like to thank our Chinese partner Syntec for the good cooperation over many, many years, and we look forward to continuing our joint efforts in the future. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mark is in Cambodia. And we also hope to have a Chinese saying giving to Mark. Mark, drink more hot water. It will keep fit for you. Okay, now let's welcome our next speaker, Madam Zheng Jian, International Project Director, Office for Social Responsibility, China National Textile and Apparel Council. Let's welcome Madam Zheng Jian. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And dear colleagues, I'm very glad to meet all of our old and new friends here and share our information about this. So in this presentation, I also want to introduce to you the work we have done between CNTech and GIZ in Southeast Asia. So since the Belt and Road, a lot of Chinese textile enterprises invested in ASEAN countries. And the Chinese enterprises participation also has added on the vitality of the textile industry in the Asian market. We work with the 6 countries and 8 institutions on the sustainable supply chain, and we built a organization called STAR. You can also check the work we have been doing. In 2017, we had a joint survey in Cambodia, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Vietnam, also included in today's report, the 4 countries in situation. So it is about the Chinese invested enterprises' social responsibility implementation in these above-mentioned 4 countries. We also have issued a survey and research report on this. You can also download it from our website. In 2018, we had a joint training in Myanmar and Cambodia. The training includes the cross culture management and the gender equality, and also the relationship between the employer and employees, etc. In 2020, we also started the COVID-19 research because we have seen the huge impact upon the overseas and the Chinese invested enterprises. So we had a Southeast Asia and Africa survey. So we work with UNIDO and GIZ on this project, and later in this year, we will have this report issued. So I want to introduce to you the structure of this report. So we have the research background, and the second is the sample profile, and the third is the impact of COVID-19 on the operation of the enterprises, and the fourth is the pandemic prevention and control measures and the impact on our employees, and also the challenges and demands for the enterprises. And also we had a summary on the conclusion. Our report includes 2 methodologies. One is qualitative, that is from January to May this year. This is the most serious period in the ASEAN countries. The peak is in February and March, and another peak is April and May. So this also is the time we recollect the questionnaires. So the enterprises, they were facing very serious pandemic control scenario. And in our qualitative studies, we have 4 methods. The first is the desktop research. It includes the pandemic-related data analysis, information analysis, and the background research. The questionnaire includes the ones we issued to the enterprises. Because of the pandemic, we cannot go to the 4 countries in person. So the questionnaire were distributed through the online system. And we have recollected 100% of the questionnaires, altogether 51. And we also noticed that our staff, they may not be able to use the questionnaire on the smartphones. So we translated them into the local language and let the enterprises to print them out. The administrators of these enterprises, they made it to print out and send this to our staff in this survey. And they also recollected them and sent it back to us. So thank you very much for your great support and the efforts you have made. And in June and between June and May June and August this year, we went to Jiangsu, the Yangtze River Valley, and Shandong province. We have visited 6 enterprises who have invested in the overseas countries, and we looked at the pandemic impact on the operation of the enterprises. In those face-to-face interviews, we collected a lot of information. And in July and September, in Zhejiang and Jiangsu, we also had 2 seminars. We have invited over 30 enterprises to participate in the discussion, and they read through the draft of this report and has given us a lot of comments and suggestions. So looking at the sample we used in the survey, so for the enterprises, we have 51 overseas enterprises in 4 countries, 24 in Myanmar. And the questionnaire in Myanmar was processed before Spring Festival. So we would like to thank Roger. Thank you very much for the efficient work. And that was before the turmoil. And many thanks to our friends in Myanmar. And the data haven't got impacted by the turmoil later. And most of the enterprises are April producers, that is over 70%. And also, they have at least 3 years history, and some as long as 10 years. So for the staff, most of them are over 500, and the better party is female workers. And this is a very representative work. And when we look at the overseas investment, general information, we feel that it is in accordance with the average. And interestingly enough, we compared the 2020 and the 2019 local, intermediate, and high-level executive managers situation, and we found that 14 enterprises we have seen the increase of the management team staff. And I believe that perhaps it is because of the pandemic, and we are not convenient to send the management people from China. And that is a factor of the development of the local management people. And we also have the questionnaire from the employees. We have got 293 employees questionnaire, and most of them are with local nationalities, and some are Chinese enterprises working locally. Most of the employees interviewed are women with a younger age, mostly unmarried. Over 53% of them are not married. And that is the average situation in these 4 countries. But there are also some exceptionals, like in Bangladesh. You can read through the report.
The third part is an analysis of the impact of a pandemic on the operation of these companies in Southeast Asia. First, we focus on how many employees are infected by the virus. So according to the statistics, during the survey period, the level of infections is relatively low, and it is also in line with the overall development of the pandemic. And less than 50% of the companies didn't have any employees who were infected. And among the 23 companies that have infections, the number of infected employees is below 20 on average. And among all the samples, no companies that had any infections, it's more than 100. And we also looked at the production of these companies. We believe the productions are hugely affected by the pandemic. First, we have some companies that have stopped production or part of the production. Over 1/3 of the companies closed or partly closed due to the pandemic, and some are still in suspension until now. And at least 6 companies' capacity is only 26 to 50% of the capacity before pandemic. And also, there are other companies that are recovering, but the recovery is at quite a low speed. And we've talked to the management of these companies who've returned to China, and we asked about the problems they face. One of the main problems is that there's a high risk in the workshops, and sometimes it's quite difficult to manage the prevention controls. And also there are other factors, including the working overtime in order to fulfill the orders. And these companies' sales and revenue are directly impacted by the pandemic. And over half of the companies have experienced a situation where European and American buyers cancel or suspend their orders due to pandemic. This is not an exclusive list. We just collect the information from the companies that participated in our survey. They sent the names of their buyers which cancel the order. And so according to our statistics, 19 companies have had canceled contracts with a value over $1 million, and the 2 companies' contracts value even reach 30 to 40 million US dollars. So they are huge numbers. And 73% of the company's income in 2020 was reduced compared with 2019. Half of the company's income was down by 1/4, and some even suffered reduced income by half. We also analyzed the factors of influence on the reduced income. The main factor is the canceling or the suspension of orders. And other factors include blockage in transportation, or they couldn't buy enough raw material, or the price of raw material went up, and also huge pressure on the cash flow. But there are different core factors. For example, in Cambodia, the main reason is that the absence of the workers is quite severe because the workers worry that they may be infected. And in Myanmar, 95% of the companies told us that their incomes or revenues affected by the canceling of orders. And in Bangladesh, the main reason or factor is shortage in raw materials. And one company in Vietnam told us in the interview that due to the problem in transportation, the raw material couldn't arrive. And also due to the change in the ordering, they had to adjust their production. And so the frequency of production, the efficiency of the production would change, which lead to problems in revenue. We used 2 questionnaires to find out the impact on the employees. In terms of employment, we find that the impact is huge. Over 61% of the companies have employees losing their jobs or being laid off, and the highest percentage is 10%. And 16 companies, or 31% of the companies, have 11% to 30% of the employees who are laid off. So this is quite a big percentage. And in terms of the change in the posts, 61% of the companies or the employees say that they haven't changed their positions. And some say that their working times changed, it's shortened, or the content of the work is changed. Some say their work is more difficult, and others say that they have work longer. And in terms of the income or salary for the employees, 80% of the company say that their salaries haven't changed or even go up. And 16% of the companies say that their salaries are reduced. And the average reduction rate is about 3%. So we have questionnaire for the employees and the companies to make sure the result is correct. And during the pandemic, the government, some governments raised the minimum level of wage. And in other countries, such as Vietnam, the government gave some relief fund, so the companies and the employees get some subsidies. So that means the companies can comply with the government requirements to take care of their employees and make sure they have a good life. In terms of the HR management and the labor relation, the pandemic has had negative impact. Here we can see that one prominent problem is about the flexibility of work. For example, closed off management or working from home. And also the companies have more negotiations with the representatives of workers or the trade union. Because the pandemic has caused more problems, so there are more opportunities for the companies to talk to the trade union. And some employees have fundamental diseases, or there are other employees such as pregnant female workers. They are special working groups, and it's more difficult to manage these groups. And the management also told us another issue, that is with pandemic, the workers treasure the opportunities for work more, so they may cooperate with the company better. And during the pandemic, there are less activities organized by the trade union, so the workers' representatives would play a more important role. Here we have a photo. We had an interview in this company in Myanmar. It's a very interesting case study. The company respect the religious belief of the workers, and they invited Buddhist monks to the company to conduct a praying ceremony with the workers. And I believe this is a very good case. And today the representative of this company will also come here and share their experience with us. And during the pandemic, the employees also have different requests. So through the questionnaire, we find different aspects of their requests. We find that the pandemic has had multiple effects on their lives. And we also look at different genders and come up with very interesting findings. For example, the female workers pay a lot of attention to the reduced family income. Over 60% of the women worry that the pandemic may lead to less income of the family, and more male workers worry about the commuting difficulty. Maybe the family is not as important in their eyes. And 30% of the female workers also tell us that another problem is they lack entertainment. This is also quite interesting. And also both male and female workers worry about health and their income. And they also tell us that they don't want the factories to shut down. And they also hope the workers can get vaccines. So these are the common requests from both male and female workers. Although pandemic has caused a lot of problems and difficulties, in the long run, the companies in our interview have quite optimistic outlook for the future. Among 51 companies, only one company was considering taking off or leaving the country, and most of them are quite optimistic. We believe the reasons are mainly due to the low labor cost in the Southeast Asian countries compared with China. Their labor cost is quite attractive. And also in the long term, the companies are willing to make long-term planning that includes the pandemic prevention and control measures. One often mentioned strategy is to strengthen the partnership with the suppliers and advancing the communication cooperation with them. And the companies also want to accelerate digital transformation and improve the management efficiency. As I said, this questionnaire was collected before February in Myanmar. And then after that, we also talked to the management of some companies in Myanmar. They have been very frank and told us about the problems centering around the political coup in Myanmar. They believe the loss caused by the pandemic is limited, but the loss and the long-term impact caused by the human intervention or the political coup is more severe and even longer, with longer impact. And then we looked at the prevention and control measures. And a lot of them have adjusted their operation. They've talked to the clients about the delivery time of the orders.
And also, we actively develop the new customers and adjust the categories or the SKU of the products. And also to have the adjustment on the target market, pay more attention to the domestic market, expand the overseas market, etc. So we have done a lot of adjustment and to meet up with the challenges. And the in close management is also a routine operation. At least 1/3 of the companies have carried out this so-called lockdown. So the average time is 15 days. But some enterprises, including an enterprise in Bangladesh, has got a close down in 180 days. So that is a very big impact on these enterprises. It is very difficult for the enterprises to carry out this kind of control. The cost is very high because they are labor intensive, and 37% of the enterprises said that they have got economic losses more than $500,000. But that is quite for quite a lot of enterprises. This is quite just an average level. We also discussed with some Vietnam enterprises. Since May and above, the government has more stringent requirement on the pandemic control. In the first half of last year, the Vietnam's situation was quite big, but later things have become more and more challenging, and it is required that the local enterprises will have the local production and also the local meal and even live there. So this is a very big challenge for the enterprises in the local area because they may not have enough land space, and it is more difficult for the management. And even they have to gather in a very small place, and this will have a negative impact on the psychological situation of the workers. So that is a very big issue. And the local government also require that the test should be done. Diagnosis test should be done every week. So that is also very expensive. So the average price for each person each time is $17. So that is a very big cost. During this pandemic control, the staff management is enhanced. Most of the enterprises in the 4 countries pay great attention to the pandemic-related control. The executive team also built their working groups for the pandemic control, and this will be a leadership organization for the pandemic control. And we also see the executive leader is the direct leader of this working group, and the local government pandemic control policy is also closely monitored during this work process. For the staff management, the major controlling measures is temperature monitoring, and also the masks and the ethanol products is given to the staff as well. And also the social space should be kept. 80% and above enterprises will require the employees to report the health status of their family members. In the pandemic, we also see the female employees are more vulnerable to the impact because they are not in the stronger position in the work, and they also take the responsibility of taking care of the family. So the female workers in the COVID-19 pandemics should get more support from the enterprises. And from the enterprises we have involved in the survey, this kind of support is actually relatively low, but some sample enterprises in Bangladesh and Vietnam, they pay more attention to protect the female employees during the pandemic, like provide the children care services and provide nursing rooms and flexible office work hours to help the female employees. And Bangladesh also provide a very good result. That is the requirement from the staff, and the features is different from the other countries. 80% of our staff in Bangladesh are married, and 70% of them are with children. So in this situation, we also need to pay more attention to the female employees' account of family responsibilities. And some enterprises in Bangladesh also provide anti-domestic violence training to the staff. So according to the Women Protection Agency in the UN, during the pandemic, the domestic violence is happening more frequently. So this is beneficial for the female employees. In the pandemic, Also, the relationship between the enterprises and the local community is very important. First is that the pandemic situation will have an impact on the work production of the enterprises. Like if the staff know that the community where the factory is located has the diagnosed patients, they will refuse to come. And the local community also will have the discrimination to the Chinese enterprises. We also have seen this kind of situation. So the enterprises are required that when taking care of their relationship management with the staff, they need to be cautious. And most enterprises can cope with the pandemic control requirements like the waste control and the sewage monitoring. They can do this as well. And at the same time, in the pandemic, we also suggest that the enterprises need to have better communication with the trade union. And we see that in the pandemic, the activities of the trade union is reduced, but some of the trade union member also try to get negotiation and dialogue with the enterprises as well. And also we see the community donation from the enterprises, and that is also to strengthen the tie with the local community. During the pandemic controls, the cost increase is very high for the enterprises. More than 50% of the enterprises indicate that the increased cost because of the pandemic control is about 100,000 US dollars, and 37% indicate that it is between 100 and 300 US dollars, and some are even more. So what are the costs? Including the direct cost, the pandemic prevention materials like the disinfection material, rescue, and the testing, separate car rental, and the personnel subsidies, and also the extra renovation because of the separation. And when there is a confirmed cases, also the enterprises should provide the support because the government may not be able to support them. The enterprises will shoulder this responsibility. Also, there are testing and the car rental and the personnel. So these are the direct costs. And for the indirect cost, it includes the testing institutions and the price of the diagnosis kit. And also, for the enterprises, some of them mentioned that they have to bear the responsibility or the financial burden from the local community or the government, like the ethanol materials. These should be bared by the community, but this is supposed to be paid by the enterprises. So the satisfaction rate from the employee, most of the employees are satisfied with the prevention measures, especially female. And they believe that this is necessary and this will not hamper their right and freedom. On the first part, we looked at the main challenges of the enterprises in the pandemic. And the most mentioned challenge is that how to allocate the responsibilities, which responsibility is should be in the scope of local government or community work, and which are supposed to be carried out by the enterprises. And some mentioned they're in lack of the information timely, and about 25% of the enterprises even feel that they are in the difficulties of the conflict related to the welfare conditions and the salaries. And there are also challenges related to environmental protection. And some mentioned that they do not know how to communicate with the local community and the government. So for the Chinese employees, 70% of the enterprises and above, they mentioned that the Chinese employees are willing to return to China, but not very strong. This is in accordance with the background of the pandemic development. So later we found that it is more and more difficult to come back to China, and the flight gets more and more expensive. And the separation and the quarantine time is a very big bother. So the Chinese employees also are facing these challenges. We also collected the requirement from the enterprises, like their requirement to the CANT and the local industry associations, including the supply for the vaccines. Since the survey was done before May, at the time, the vaccine support was not expanded to the ASEAN countries. So at the time, it was a very urgent issue. And also, the enterprises hope that they can get better technical guidance for the pandemic control and prevention. And the associations and trade unions and the international brands can build a better platform for the enterprises communication, including with the local governments. And also, they hope that they can get some training and information about the best practices and the information sharing. And for customers, provide more flexible conditions in terms of order delivery and respect the spirit of the contract and implement the contract instead of because of the pandemic, just cancel the order. So that is a big pain point for the enterprises. So as mentioned by Director Yan, in the STAR, we have carried out some work. From April this year, we initiated a responsible purchasing initiation and advocate that the international buyers, brands, and the clients can be responsible enough. And when the order is confirmed, we can do some modification or adjustment instead of cancel it directly, because this will have a very negative impact on the workers on the supply chain. So for the government, the enterprises hope that the government can provide the vaccine to the employees. That is the most urgent need. And the enterprise also hope that the government can maintain a stable policy during the pandemic to avoid the management confusion caused by the frequent policy changes, and also the tax rebate and the social security and other supporting policies like materials, so that we can go through these difficulties.
And also during the survey, we learned that companies have some demands for the collaboration mechanism of medical service or the vaccine cooperation. They also would like to have shorter quarantine so that it's easier for Chinese employees to go to the other countries to work. And the main conclusion is that the pandemic has exerted huge impact on production and sales. According to the survey, some companies have resumed production very quickly, but this has some limitations. With the development of the pandemic in July and August, some countries had large-scale outbreaks, so some companies had to suspend production again. And the impact on the sales is also obvious. The demand is reduced, and the canceling of the orders, and also the cost of wages is still there and even higher. And from the employees, we find that employees are less motivated. But with more awareness and understanding of the pandemic, they also would like to stay with the companies and go through difficulties together with the company. Thirdly, most of the companies express optimistic views for the investment future. They still believe that low labor cost and preferential tariff are the main attractions, and they also make long-term development plan to respond to the pandemic, and they will also normalize the prevention and control measures. And also they have some impact on the relations with the communities. In terms of the prevention and the control measures, the companies have quite complete measures and the mechanism. For example, they establish special task groups and designate managers to be responsible for these measures. They also have regular monitoring system. In Bangladesh and Vietnam, the companies pay more attention to the protection for women, and over 80% of the companies of the employees have positive comment on the prevention and control measures, and the companies have expressed their needs to better communicate with the trade unions, industrial associations and governments. So STAR will establish a communication mechanism to relay their requests to the different stakeholders. We have given you a printed copy of the report. If you need an electronic version, you can go to our website. And if you are online participant, our online host will send 2 links for Chinese and English version of the report so that you can download them. So due to the pandemic, we could only access limited samples, and we only had limited time to complete the survey. Maybe the information in the report is not conclusive, but if you have any questions or if you have any comments, please contact us. That's from me. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Zheng Jian. So this report has summarized a lot of information, but there are also a lot of details. So it's a quite comprehensive report. That's why now we are 20 minutes lagging behind the schedule. But it's okay. I believe both on-site and online participants now have a lot of questions and comments. So if you're online, you can type your questions in the chat box via Zoom, and then we will collect these questions and hope we can have the opportunities to raise them during the panel discussion. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Liang Xiaohui, Chief Researcher, Office for Social Responsibility of Sintech, to moderate the panel discussion. So I will invite the panelists. We have 5 panelists. All the male panelists are online, and the female panelists are on site. So I will invite Ms. Heng Zeli, Senior VP from Handle Enterprise, to the stage. And we also have Ms. Xue Jiali, Admin Manager from Wuxi Jingmao Company. Please take your seats. And online, we have 3 panelists. They are from 3 investment in destinations representing the Textile Association. First, we have Mr. Enjoy Ho, President of China Textile Association in Cambodia. Welcome. We also have Mr. Roger Law, Secretary General of Apparel Chapter of Myanmar Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. David Ding, Vice President of Overseas Chinese Association in Bangladesh.
Manufacturers Association, President of the NGMA. She's also on. I think she will be asking some questions later. Okay. 那我们5位嘉宾呢，这个代表了我们
So these 5 panelists represent the most important stakeholders in the industry. We have representatives of enterprises investing in these overseas countries, and we also have representatives from the Chamber of Commerce and Industrial Association. So this report has very important key findings. I believe you also have your own thoughts and questions. So we can have a discussion based on these key findings. So first, I have prepared some questions for the panelists so they can answer from their own perspective. And then I will ask a specific question to each panelist according to their background. So the first question is for all the panelists online and offline. So we've listened to Ms. Zheng Jian's presentation. So which findings touched you most, or for which points you have most relevant to you, or do you have different findings both in China and overseas? Are there any other impacts from the pandemic for your company? And especially for social responsibility and sustainability, what are the impacts? There can be both positive and negative impacts. So I will first hand over to our online guests. Mr. Ho first. So you have 3 minutes to answer this question. You can also introduce your association. And I'm the president of China Textile Association in Cambodia. I've been in Cambodia for a long time. I came here in 1996. Currently, there are only about 600 import and export companies in Cambodia, and over 50% are Chinese companies. So if we include companies from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, about 76% are from China. So the majority are from the Great China region. And for textile and apparel, over 60% of the fabrics and auxiliary materials are from China. So for Ms. Zheng's report, we also participated in the survey. And of course, the survey period is different from now, but I think their report is very detailed. In 2020, when pandemic first came out, the main problem we faced was canceling of orders and reduced demand. And in 2021, in Cambodia, we faced more difficulties. I think Mr. Luo also agree. In Myanmar, a lot of the orders shifted from Myanmar to Cambodia. So we have more orders, but it's difficult to find workers. Because in February, there was an outbreak in Cambodia. It was earlier than Myanmar, and it hit the peak in May. So at that time, a lot of the workers went home and was quarantined. And because they didn't want to be locked down in the factory, so they went home. And also they were panicked and didn't want to leave home to come back to the factory. And so in May, around that time, we had enough orders, but insufficient workers. So it was another difficulty. And in Cambodia, we started in March to give vaccination to the people, and the workers are the first groups to be vaccinated, and now over 20 million people have received vaccines, and they have begun the third shot. So actually, Cambodia has quite a stable situation. The daily infections are around 200, and we have our own internal testing mechanism. So maybe we won't have any infection in 2 or 3 months, and the testing price is also quite low. The government would purchase the test kit from China. It's at about $2 per kit. It's very low price. And in previously, the cost of the testing is an extra burden to the companies. And actually, the cost goes up in the later stage because the workers are in quarantine, but we still have to pay the wages. While the factories don't have any revenue. Of course, the government would give 30 to 40 dollars to the workers per person. It's like a subsidy. So to some extent, it's relieved our burden. So the Chinese companies in these countries have had huge impact. And of course, as a industrial association, we should play an important role in those countries to help these companies investing in Southeast Asia.
And for example, like we work with the Social Responsibility Office of the China National Textile and Apparel Council, and from many years ago, we have been working very closely with them. And during the pandemic, we continued our close exchanges via the online channel. And I also want to add one content above Madam Zheng Jian's report. In Cambodia, we pay great attention to the support given to the female employees, like the pregnant staff. And also for the lactation period, women, we know that in Cambodia, they have not got the support on the social welfare coverage from local government, but we provide the vacation with salary. So our association suggests the members of the association so that we can give them vacations with a salary as a support given to them. And we also did something to help the local enterprises. Okay, so this is the second question. So, Mr. He, we can cover that question later, and I will raise this to you. Thank you. And just now, Mr. He mentioned the connection between Myanmar and Cambodia, and also this has caused the other explosive situation in Cambodia. And also, I would like to have Roger Luo, Secretary General of the April chapter of Myanmar Chinese Chamber of Commerce, to introduce us the situation in Myanmar. So we are a part of the Myanmar Chinese Chamber of Commerce. As a branch of it, there are 300 members of this chamber. The fabric and the apparel is about half of them. And we were registered in November 2017. And it is self-determined and non-profit, and try to help the guidance and also protect the right for the Chinese invested enterprises, and to be a bridge between China and Myanmar, and to carry out the social responsibility and promote the cooperation between China and Myanmar. So this is the mission of the Chamber of Commerce. In the pandemic, the situation and the impact upon Chinese invested enterprises is the loss of orders. In last year, in the whole year, if compared with the situation before 2019, when we used to have over 600 apparel factories, but now we only have 498, and the other over 100 is closed. So this situation in Myanmar includes the political turmoil of the coups and the pandemic. So this impact is stronger. And the existing 498 also is of a smaller scale. It is about 70% of the capacity compared with the full level, and some even about 50% of the capacity. The operation is now quite normal. Because of the political situation in EU, because of the pressure of the trade union in Myanmar and other international communities, we are facing the sanctions. The government is facing the sanctions. So the pandemic is not the biggest issue for Myanmar. Instead, the political issue And the risk and concerns of the sanction will be a big issue. And because this will cause a loss of the order from the big brands. Yesterday, MCAN, Rosalind also were here. And we had a discussion with the NGOs and the brands and had an online discussion with them. We also looked at the China, Myanmar, and Korea network. We also have expressed our opinion to the European organizations. So in Myanmar, we still concerned about the future because of the political situation. Okay, thank you, Roger. So it is different from the Bangladesh, the Cambodian situation. So how about Bangladesh? Thank you. So we have David. So, the Overseas Chinese Association in Bangladesh was established in 2017. We have 300 members. Half of them are related to the fabric and apparel. In Bangladesh, in the apparel industry, there are about 5,000 factories compared with the other countries. Besides China, we have the largest number of enterprises in this industry. So I have some data. Look at the export before the COVID-19. At the time, the monthly export is about 12 million US dollars value. And now the monthly export is about 8.8 million US dollars. In July and August this year, the volume is for the apparel export is 5.64, which is 18% lower year on year, and even lower compared with Vietnam. So in the COVID, we see a lot of order cancellation. But in July 2020, we started to see the recovery. And in the last fiscal year, the total export for Bangladesh is 31.4 billion US dollars with a growth year on year 55%. And when China go into the advanced manufacturing, and also because of the severe issues because of the lack of the vaccine in the other ASEAN countries, Bangladesh got more and more orders. The goal for the apparel export set by the government is an increase of 8.5%, and that is about 30.4 billion US dollars. It is expected that in next summer, the export will have an increase of 20 to 30%. As mentioned by Secretary Luo from Myanmar, in Bangladesh, in the first half of the year, we have seen a lot of enterprises moved from Myanmar to Bangladesh. And I mentioned one example, that is Singapore. The factory used to be, they are from Jiangsu, and the factory used to be in Myanmar. And because of the turmoil, the capacity has been moved 100% to Bangladesh because the factory had to be closed in Myanmar. And this might be an opportunity for Bangladesh. China is upgrading its production capacity, and Myanmar is not quite stable, but Bangladesh is enjoying the stability. the only fluctuation we had experienced is the COVID. So in the pandemic, we also make great efforts on the vaccine supply and etc. Thank you, David. So in the three countries, we have seen that they have their own situations, but they are closely connected with one another. The three leaders of the regional industry association has given us the general information, and now we also hope to get the information and the viewpoint from the government. So we invited representatives from two enterprises. They have a very heavy investment in overseas. So first, I want to introduce Ms. Heng. I am from Wuxi, and our business is mainly in Myanmar and Egypt. And we specialized in the apparel and the dyeing of the apparels and also the vertical production line. And I have learned a lot from the introduction. And when we look at this process, so we have seen that we have adapted ourselves to the new normal in the pandemic. Maybe we didn't have time to look through the difficulties and harsh times, and we even looked more into the future. The leaders in the industry also has given us introduction on the general background. So I want to talk about what we have been doing. We are a developing enterprise, and we are still in the stage of actively expanding the capacity and the scale because of the COVID. The impact on our overseas planning is very big, like our phase 1 textile factory and phase 2 textile for Myanmar, and our weaving and the dyeing and apparel factories. The projects are all delayed. In Egypt, we delayed for 1 year. In Myanmar, in the phase 2, the weaving and the dyeing and apparel stopped production right after the commissioning, and it still have not recovered. This is a very big impact on the development and the pace of the enterprise. And when we look at the orders, we receive order from mainly Japan. So the cancellation of the orders caused by the changes from our client is not the biggest concern, but the following up production facilities is for the order from US and EU. But with the lack of the confidence of the pandemic prevention, this has got a negative impact on the revival of the orders and the development of our factories. We have a multiple channel supply chain. So for our clients during the pandemic, they immediately asked us to move this order to China. So in the beginning point of COVID, in Myanmar, we had 8,000 staff, but in China, we only have 2,000 staff. So it is almost not possible to directly move the capacity to China. But at that time, we do not have other choices. So we need to still implement this contract and go through these very difficult times. So as mentioned by our leaders in the associations, actually, the orders moved to China 100%. So we were suffered from the lack of capacity and the cost. Some clients, they have made up for the tariff and the customs. But to be frank, the clients from US and EU, they are not willing to have this burden. So we have to bear it, pay the gap of the cost and the custom increase.
So we've been very busy since the first outbreak. We've had a lot of difficulties. You don't really want to look back on it, and we didn't have any gains, only losses. So the ordering, the operation, all aspects of the company have been affected. But compared with the coup in Myanmar, I don't think the difficulties brought by the pandemic were that great. So that's our company. Thank you. Ms. Xue, Wuxi Jingmao is very important investor in overseas countries. Good afternoon. I'm from Wuxi Jingmao. And we're a textile company with global supply chain. And it's mainly concentrated in Ethiopia and in Asia, including Vietnam and Cambodia. And the pandemic has had a lot of impact on all the companies, but for domestic companies, I don't think the impact is that great. Our main products are pajamas and leisure wear and also pet products. And they actually needed by the people who work from home. They spend longer time at home. So their needs for the pajamas, leisure wear and pet products growing. So from February to March, we already recovered the production, and the capacity is also quite good. And I would like to talk about our investment in Ethiopia. We invested $30 million in the fabric factory. It's mainly for the shirts. And we also invested $3 million in a factory making leisure shirts. But due to the pandemic, people were from home, so the sales of shirts greatly reduced. So this has actually posed a great impact on these factories, including cancellation of orders. And these factories stopped production for about 3 to 4 months. But we have a high sense of social responsibility. We recognize that the people are the fundamentals for the long-term development. So we still paid wages to all the workers. And after the productions resumed, the absence rate of our workers is quite low compared with other companies in the same industrial park. And in Ethiopia, in terms of pandemic prevention and control, I want to say that their culture is quite different from Chinese culture. The workers are not aware of the importance of these measures, and they also are resistant towards the vaccination. And we have close cooperation with some international organizations. So they would organize some training sessions about pandemic prevention for our employees. We also give out pamphlets. We also provide them with free prevention supplies. China sent a lot of supplies to us. So we give them for free, including the Chinese and Ethiopian employees. Thank you. So even in the most difficult time, these companies still stick to responsible operation and sustainability. So we have some time. I will ask the second question. We'll first go back to the association leaders. It's related to the role of the industrial association. According to my observation, during the pandemic, the overseas industrial associations not only played the role of prevention and control and coordination, And also they help to unify the employees. So we would say that never waste any crisis, because crisis can also be an opportunity. So I would like to invite the three association leaders to talk about how the association play the important role in your country. Mr. Ho, please, 3 minutes each. So I would like to keep the long story short. In the pandemic, the textile associations, our roles have been more important. In Cambodia, for example, since the outbreak last year, when there was shortage in the materials, we started to promote the cooperation and the coordination among different companies. And if one factory has enough raw materials, maybe they can give some to another company who are in need. And some companies have started production, but the orders are cancelled, or they have started production but can't receive the payment. We would work with these companies and write to the suppliers to urge them to make payments and protect the interests of the workers. So that's what we did in the beginning of the pandemic. And then we need to guide the Chinese companies in terms of preventing and controlling the pandemic. In the beginning, we couldn't buy any masks. The companies couldn't buy the masks. So as an association, we would organize the purchase of the prevention materials of supplies and distribute them to the member companies. And we also coordinate with the consulates and make sure that the management of the Chinese companies would get vaccines first. So we coordinate with the consulates and the local governments to give vaccines to the management of these Chinese companies, even if we need to pay more. And we also donate to the government so that the government can purchase more vaccines. There's not much money, but it's played very important role. And in March 2020, a lot of the companies in China hadn't resumed the production. So in Cambodia, we worked and talked to the embassy. And we gave the list of the Chinese suppliers to the Ministry of Commerce. So when they resumed the production, these suppliers got preferential treatment. Some companies are in Jiangsu province, and then the workers received a course asking whether you have whether you are prepared to resume production, and the call is from the Ministry of Commerce. They were surprised. It's actually because we talked to the embassy, which talked to the Ministry of Commerce, and then the ministry contacted the vice mayor of the province to take special care of these suppliers. And we also talked to some logistic companies. And we provide information to our member companies about which shipping companies that they can use, and also they can provide a direct transportation without diverting to the harbor in Vietnam. So these measures help those factories to have smooth transportation, which are very helpful. And we also negotiate with Cambodia government, because in the beginning of the pandemic, the government had a measure that's just one measure fitting all. That means if there's infection in one factory, then the factory had to close. And this would cause huge loss because all the production had to stop. So we negotiated with the government. So if there's a case, a confirmed case in one department or in one production line, then only this this department or the production line is suspended without interfering with other departments and lines. So they have local quarantine rather than comprehensive quarantine. And so Dr. Liang and Ms. Zheng and Ms. Yan have kept in touch with the Cambodian Association and the companies. They also provide us with training on sustainable development. So we try our best to help these companies to improve their competitiveness. And in the beginning, no one believed that they could do this. But after the training, these factories all recognized this kind of effort. And as I said, one training was about protecting the interests of female workers. So all the pregnant women or the women who have to feed the babies can have paid vacations or leaves. There are not many people like workers like that, but we have to protect their interests. And I think this kind of effort has been recognized by our member companies. That's why these companies become more united. So these are some of the learnings in the recent 2 years after the pandemic. And also to Mr. Luo, I would like to say that when you talk to your clients in EU about whether you have any orders or different orders, they may answer you directly. But if you talk to other suppliers in other countries, because the time difference, they may not answer you immediately.
And also, we see the pandemic they changes and the breakout of the turmoils. So in Cambodia, the non-peak season is still with a lot of pressure on the orders. So we have a lot of orders, and we don't have to worry about these orders for now. So things are more optimistic right now. So thank you, Mr. Luo. And also, this has made me feel very pleased that a lot of preparation we have made, like the sustainability and the responsible operation. So this has helped our members and our staff, and that made me feel really proud. So Roger, so what's your opinion on this? So I know that you are very familiar during this pandemic, and the Chamber of Commerce also is working on quite well. And I also have seen you have done a lot of wonderful things. So can you share with us your experiences on the responsible operation and what's your roles as the Chamber of Commerce? Okay, please keep the remarks brief. So please turn on the microphone. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman He. And for the Chamber of Commerce for Chinese enterprises. So during the pandemic, we used up a WeChat public account and the social network platform to express the information and the policies for the Myanmar government, like the masks and the social distance and the lack of the gathering, the decrease of the gathering. So this also helped with the improvement on the awareness of the pandemic control. And also, I want to mention the Twin action, that is to provide the vaccines. And in the Chamber of Commerce, we played the role of coordination and help over 90% of the Chinese citizens to arrange the vaccination. And the Chamber of Commerce also work with the All China General Chamber of Commerce. If the citizens have not got vaccinated in the Tremio project, they still can get the vaccination. We also provide the vaccination service to the local staff. And the embassies also actively work with us and carried out the coordination. The vaccines and the donations and also the purchase of the vaccines from China also has given us a lot of support. And for the Chinese invested enterprises, the Chamber of Commerce also keep close look at the confirmed cases. And we also have a reporting system on this. So for every enterprise, we have a WeChat group focusing on the confirmed case and the employees situation, help with the coordination of the resources and the support. So most of the Chinese employees got vaccinated timely, including the staff who are willing to get vaccinated. So in the factory, the infection symptom is not that severe. But yes, of course, we lost some of our colleagues. And talking about the social responsibility, we actively work with the NGOs and provide donation to the local community. In September 28th, we had the work joined with the Myanmar office of the Peace Development Fund and donate the rice and the food for the local community. For Chinese invested enterprises have already started the operation. In the current stage, the order is enough. We are worrying about the future, of course. So we hope that this will not happen. During the meeting, the MCRB also have sent me a message saying that the risk is only on those enterprises without the social responsibility sense. So actually in Myanmar, we have young human resources, and they are very diligent. And I believe that if no other impact, we will see a very promising future. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. And I'm very glad that we have a promising future. And how about David from Bangladesh? Thank you very much. During the pandemic, together with the enterprises and the charities, we have donated $2.2 million to domestic, and we also have a liaison group for the Chinese citizens in Bangladesh. We also have the activities to provide the masks and the glasses and also the other prevention kits. And we also have the diagnosis kit supported to 390 Chinese colleagues and citizens. And in the Chunmiao program in May this year, we work with the Chinese Enterprises Association in Bangladesh. We helped to provide vaccination to over 2,000 Chinese citizens. So in Bangladesh, the Chinese invested enterprises and Chinese citizens, 95% and above, have finished 2 times vaccination. So that is in Bangladesh. Thank you. Thank you, David. Okay, now let's move on to our 2 panelists. Ms. Han, you mentioned that the political issue is a very big one. And also, this has given pressure to the enterprises. So how to deal with this situation? And what's your countermeasure for the maintenance of the responsible and the sustainable operation? Thank you. So in the COVID and in the coups, we actually have seen the opportunities. Of course, we have got the impacts, and we also have seen the tidying out of some enterprises. So for us, I believe that it is also a reshuffling of the industry, and this will bring opportunities as well. Although the condition is very harsh, we still make the decision to expand our capacity. So in Egypt, we have started the phase 2 and sign agreement, and also for the dyeing and the weaving foundations. So we will soon have the whole industry chain covered, integrated factory, and we are the first one of its kind in Egypt. For the fabric and for the other projects in Myanmar, we never thought about giving up, and we are still waiting for the revival. Another is that in this past 2 crises, we also realize that we should not totally give up Chinese market. So we have adjusted quickly our domestic strategy, like the client strategy and our planning for the domestic production foundation. So these are the changes brought about by the COVID and the coups. And for the pandemic control, we have 2 principles. One is to be agile, and the second is human-oriented. So for the swift adaptation to the situation, For example, in Spring Festival last year, we have received a lot of news like the pandemic, like the concerns of the clients. So at that time, we were still in the vacation, and we realized that probably we may lose the order and the purchasing function. So in Myanmar, we built a second headquarters. And in only in 1 week after the Spring Festival, we sent a team of 50 Chinese staff to Myanmar. The scale in Myanmar is very big, and we are still worrying about if we have lost the function in China, how can we deal with the orders in Myanmar? And we also built a purchasing group in Thailand. We also have the marketing core staff to be sent to Tokyo to work. So all these have been done in about 2 or 3 days. It also is proved that although there is a temporary lack of order, we can say that the impact on us is still limited. Another is human-oriented. In the past 2 years, the impact is very big, but we adhere to no laying off and no reduction on the salary. On the other hand, we provide the supply given to our staff because of the COVID-19 prevention. And that is a very big sum of money. Because we believe that if we can keep the people, we can keep the development opportunity, and we cannot afford the loss of confidence from the staff. So for the hardware, software, and the material supply, we all adhere to this principle that the human orientation is the most important thing. And when we have got the experience from China, we require that our staff in Egypt and in Myanmar strictly follow the procedures in China, like the prevention, like the disinfection, the social distance, the diagnosis, and also to add more prudence in the employees' food. And we believe that the pandemic also is an opportunity for us to increase the confidence from our clients and the trust from our employees. And the pandemic gave us some opportunities to stop. And the networking is getting less and less. But on the other hand, it gives us more time to think about the future. So we have the fast expansion, and we also can see the rethinking of our business model in China. And maybe some of our clients, they will give up us, and some will leave us. And we also have learned lessons from the lack of efficiency during the pandemic. So all these have given us improvement opportunity. It is beneficial for the long-term future. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Let's put our hands together as an appreciation. Yes, I have seen the adjustment timely in the pandemic, and we can get opportunities in the pandemic. And to grasp this opportunity and realize improvement also rely on the concept of human-oriented work. And we also need to be cautious, stable, and have communication with the stakeholders and with our clients as well.
So we are glad to see that this company has become the role model for the others. And the Wuxi Jingmao is also a global company, and they mainly serve the global clients. So your clients or buyers from Europe and America, do they have any policies based on human orientation, and how do they impact your policy? And we always stick to responsible purchasing. And in the pandemic, we would pay more attention to our clients, and we would have a video conference with our overseas factories to understand the situation there, especially the employees. And because the sales of shirts was reduced, that means the order for our Ethiopian factory was affected. So we adjusted our production capacity, and we moved a semi-automated mask production line to Ethiopia so that we can keep the income level of our workers. And the masks, in 2020, we exported about 100 million to the US market. And since the working from home and travel ban or the lockdown of various countries, a lot of our clients had higher requirements for the suppliers. They treat us not only as a supplier, but also a partner. So they require that we can provide more support to them. So through digital transformation, for example, 3D design, we can provide the customer, the client, with the 3D design and digital design so that we can reduce the cost of posting the samples and the physical design. This is actually mutually beneficial. So we see this actually accelerated your digital transformation. So the time is already over 4 o'clock, so I will not ask the third question. And we still have questions, discussions for online and on-site participants. So I'd like to thank the 5 panelists. They are the industrial leaders. Thank you for your work and your cooperation and support. Thank you very much. So the on-site participants, if you have any questions, you can have the microphone. And our online participants, you can type your questions in the chat box so that we can divert your questions, forward your questions to our experts here. And now I'd like to invite a representative from GIZ, Alexandra Bain, a fabric project, to moderate the discussion. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Roger, David, and Mr. Ho, nice to see you.
Bangladesh and Myanmar, and I will switch to English now. Very glad to see you all here in the room and online, and we would like to use the chance to just answer a few questions to any of our speakers in the room or online, and of course also to Syntec, who presented this report to us. And I see we've got the first questions coming in online, so we will start right away with the first. So the first question is, do you think the fact that sustainability can also drive business has become stronger or weaker during the pandemic? So I think I'll start with the ladies in the room. Because both Ms. Xue and Ms. Heng have actually talked about some of the measures I think that you have done, which are sustainability measures. Would you say that sustainability has become stronger or has become more important maybe during the pandemic?
首先感谢这个提问。
So first, I'd like to thank you for the question. I think for our company, sustainable development has always been the main principle or the mission for our company, because the development of a company is not in the short run. We actually want to build a 100-year dream for Jingmao. So during the pandemic, sustainable development really promoted our development. For example, the production in Ethiopia used the water treatment facility, so we can achieve zero emission, and 75% of the used water can be recycled. And because we are in Sawa, which is a tourism city, we can help protect the environment and promote their economic development. So sustainable development is a long-term opportunity for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll ask the second question from the chat now, and to everybody online, please feel free to post more on the chat. We have a question from Germany, from Jochen Weikert, and he's looking at the overseas Chinese producers, but I think the question also applies for the association representatives. How can the partnership that you see here today between Syntec and GIZ help you address challenges that you face in producing in Cambodia, in Myanmar and Bangladesh? I think we've heard from Mr. Ho earlier, and I was very glad to hear that, by the way, that the trainings that were conducted also with the Syntec and GIZ on different topics, for example, gender equality in Cambodia, specifically to Chinese overseas investors, were a topic. Mr. Ho, maybe you have other ideas in mind of support needs where especially the development partnerships and the work with associations could help you. I think for the English speakers, we just have to wait a second for the translation to see if Mr. Ho from Cambodia has any other support needs. Otherwise, Roger, if you have any wishes from Myanmar or any recommendations, we see you on the screen as well. Feel free.
Okay, and
likewise. Thank you very much, Roger. We understand that the business survival, of course, for Myanmar is a key topic. We've heard that also from others. Today, of course, orders are often moving away, and we very much hope that the local situation will improve for you. Let me check if there's any other add-in from Cambodia.
I'm very glad to see you online. In Cambodia, we have cooperation with Syntec and GIZ. With the GIZ cooperation started quite early, and we also have work with Syntec. It started many years ago. In Cambodia, there are a lot of Chinese invested companies, so we have always cooperated with Syntec to provide the Chinese invested companies with training. We would provide lectures and workshops. And through the cooperation, we find some aspects are actually more important than we thought or more effective. So in the future, we will continue to work with Syntech and the GIZ to provide more trainings to the Chinese companies. And I agree with what Ms. Han just said. She said the pandemic is like shuffling cards. So the pandemic has do the shuffling of these enterprises. So those remaining or surviving enterprises will do more contributions to all the buyers and suppliers and the whole industry. So I think this is somehow helping to improve the whole industry. So with the Syntech and GIZ, and with our suppliers of fabrics and auxiliary materials, we will continue to cooperate so that we can make sure the industry is developing in a healthier direction.
Thank you very much. Let me also check in the room if we have any on-site questions. We also have a microphone here. And you can also ask in Chinese, Han Yu de Wen Di Ge. So let me double check if anybody in the room would like to ask any more questions. Otherwise, we'll check if there's more questions from the chat. Don't be too shy. Zheng Jian, do you want to ask a question? Okay, we have one more coming, which is for the lessons that you have taken on business resilience. So in how far do you think that something that the crisis taught you can also help you with the, I think we need a translation device here in the front also, otherwise for our two, because I'm looking at Ms. Heng, because I think this is a good question for her as well. So let's give it another moment. Make sure. I hope you can hear me now. Yes, I think this is a question that might be one for you. In how far has have the lessons that you have taken in the pandemic on how to be more resilient also helped you for the future? So is there something that you have learned during the crisis, which you can say now will also help you if there's a future disruption to be more resilient?
Yes. And I should say the pandemic has improved the comprehensive capability of our company. And for the whole industry, we believe if we have endured the difficulties and faced this crisis, where we can find the solutions more quickly so that our companies can survive better. It's a great opportunity for us.
Thank you very much. And I think you've stressed the agility need also in the past. And I guess that also partly answers this question, be more agile. Let me see if there's any other questions coming in. Yeah, we've got one question in the room. Can we get a microphone to this? For the translators.
Yes, I am David. I'm from RBA. So in the sharing, I found that during the pandemic, some clients they left this loss or damage to the factory. So in Hengtian, the representative also mentioned that we learned about that. So in the strategic development, we also will need to assess our client. If without credibility, maybe we can stop the cooperation in the future. So in GIZ and in our institution, so have you thought about that? Can we make an assessment ranking? So for the client, if they place the order, can we give them some parameters or index to show that which client is more credible for the supplier? And in our strategic cooperation in the future, it is a possible support.
Thank you very much for this very good question. Let me first look at Yen Yen if she would like to answer on behalf of Syntec. Otherwise, I'm also happy to say a few words for GIZ. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, this is a very good question. And today, when we are talking about this report, the report is a reflection or is a mirror about the past, the influence from the COVID to our industry, and help us to know more about maybe the crisis for us in the future, or the risks we may face, like the unbalanced supply chain and the order cancellation. So you mentioned whether or not we can have an assessment or the ranking or a white list for the clients to show their credibility in the supply chain. As I have introduced, starting from January this year, 13 organizations in the apparel and the textile have initiated a sustainable trade terms initiative. So this initiative is to advocate that the buyer and the suppliers need to have a closer cooperation with one another. The 13 industry associations are representing 70% of the total trade volume globally. So we hope that the central articles in this initiation can support the supply chain and balance this supply chain to make it more fair to all the partners in the supply chain and to have a platform for the dialogue. And this has been supported by the international associations. Personally, I also believe that no matter which one of us and what role we are playing, we need to look into the future development, as mentioned by Ms. Xue and Ms. He. So we have a shared dream about a more promising future. So I believe that for the brands and for the buyers, they share this dream as well. Of course, we may have different interests and concerns. I believe that a shared platform for us to reach the consensus, and we can jointly achieve that goal. That is much better. And for every one of us, if we look at the ability and the credibility of taking the responsibility, and if a brand or enterprise fail to do that, to some extent, in the supply chain, we can provide some objective comments and information. Maybe they will lose their position in the supply chain in the future because of this lack of credibility. So from a Syntec's perspective, we encourage And we also set the bottom line for the constraint. And we hope that this platform can help with the discussion and exchanges. And also GIZ has provided great technology support and got this good result. So an extra comment I want to share with our friends and colleagues here is that we need to be better prepared for the future. The COVID-19 has given us some pressures and also given some insight for us to prepare for the future, like the risk recognition and the solutions. And we need a planning beyond the current situation. So I hope that this discussion can initiate the thinking, and I hope that we can have following up discussion on this part.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yen, and I hope your question was answered. So I think this initiative, and you see on the chat also more information has been shared, the Sustainable Terms of Trade initiative by 13 producer associations representing the interests of manufacturers in the purchasing practices discussions globally, is a very, very important step in the right direction. And please feel free to actively engage in this discussion. And I don't know if you're a member of Syntec, but you are also, the producers, very welcome to engage. The initiative has just published a white paper, as Yen said, with some key recommendations and further recommendations of practices they no longer want to see in the industry, which is exactly what you said before. And the next phase will focus on getting that implemented, and transparency is one of the focus areas. And of course, as Yen stressed, working with MSIs, working with brands to see how we can really turn that into tangible changes on the ground. I don't see more questions on the chat and online. One more.
Yeah, there's one more question from Tony, if I remember. For our two enterprises, that is for the risk management. Is that true that because of the pandemic, you will have some changes on the risk management? For the risk management, we look at the credibility of the client. As mentioned just now, the cancellation of the order and the delay of the delivery and all the losses on the shoulder of the supplier. So we, because of this, will reassess the credibility of the client. And we will serve the order of the U.S. clients, and we will have the trade insurance. If the credibility of the client is not enough, we will stop the trade with them. And our factories in Cambodia, in Vietnam, and in Ethiopia, we have followed up the investment. Even in the in the severity of the pandemic, we never stopped it, but we slowed down this pace to lower the risk. For our enterprise, as mentioned by Director Yan, we also are very cautious and have a detailed risk management plans. In the pandemic, we feel that based on our existing strategic planning, because previously we mostly serve the order placed from Japan, and our production focused on Myanmar. But in this pandemic and the related issues, we feel that this is a lesson for us. We need to balance the planning for the capacity arrangement and also diversify the source of the order. So this, I believe, is important for the OEM enterprises.
Thank you very much. So risk management, diversification, and hearing that from a Chinese overseas investor talking to an international audience about orders produced in Myanmar for clients in Japan, that shows how international this supply chain and this industry really is. with that, I would like to close the Q&A and slowly but surely move over to the final closing speech. Thank you very much, Ms. Xu and Ms. Heng, and also to Roger, David, and Mr. Ho online. All right, then, since time has elapsed, without further ado, it is also my pleasure now to try to summarize a very, very rich discussion in a few closing remarks. First of all, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of our speakers again for sharing your experiences and your lessons on dealing with COVID-19 and what the pandemic had in terms of impact for you and your production. I think we had a really, really good discussion, and we heard really good examples today of how companies, especially the Chinese overseas invested ones, were forced to react to the pandemic. I remember a statement by Ms. Heng where she said at some time they had to move 100% of orders back to China, despite the costs, and that agility in this regard has been a huge challenge and something, as we learned now, that also needs to be a critical success factor in the future. And we've heard a lot about the efforts that have been undertaken to remain operational, as Roger said online, even to remain in business and to do all that in a sustainable way. Now, China is certainly a special case here. And of course, if we look at the situation for overseas investors who are not at home and who face many more cross-border difficulties, plus intercultural challenges when working in another context, of course, these times are extremely challenging. And I think we've also heard from our 3 online speakers today about the important role that producer associations can play in that regard. Roger said something nice. He said they want to be a bridge between China and Myanmar, and that they have really tried to become a liaison office, something also David mentioned, being a liaison, bringing Chinese producers together in Bangladesh, trying to also be a bridge to the home production. And I think all of us have experienced it during this crisis, where I think we all realize it's really hard to keep up to date with the regulations of our own governments. What are the policies? What are the regulations? Do I have to wear a mask? What do I have to stick with? And now imagine doing that, not at home, but following up with the laws and regulations and policies in another country and in another language. And I think that summarizes very well the challenges. And at the same time, I think we also heard today that many of the challenges that producers face overseas or at home, the challenges are not new. Even the example of the local labor law, it has been a challenge before. It's actually something we also did trainings on together with Mr. Ho and the Cambodian Association in Cambodia for Chinese overseas investors. So the challenges have been there before, but the challenges have been made more visible and they have become much more severe during the pandemic. And I think we heard some really good examples, for example, by Mr. Ho about lessons that were then applied in the crisis. You mentioned leave for Cambodian women workers that were not entitled usually to get leave during pregnancy or during lactating periods. And I think we've also heard the example from Ms. Xue from Ethiopia, where you said you were closed for 3 to 4 months in a row, but you kept paying your workers. And this is something, of course, in many cases you didn't have to do this, but you decided to do this. And I think we've heard a lot today how this then led, in your case, to a low absence rate afterwards, to more trust. And I remember when we joined the interviews with Syntec to Wuxi and to other locations for Chinese overseas investors, many people said that thanks to the measures that they have taken during the pandemic, they had the feeling that the connection to their workers was much closer than before, that there was more loyalty, more willingness to really fight for the company. Also something we heard for the factories in Myanmar, where people really valued their job and the fact that the factory remains open. Roger, something you mentioned earlier today also, of course, this can also help us understand that sustainability efforts can really make a difference. They do pay off, and there's studies showing that. But I think today we saw some really good examples how social responsibility, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability, namely remaining in the market, remaining in business, are really, really closely linked and can make a huge difference. And I think we've seen good examples today of Chinese overseas investors also covered in the Syntec studies that use this disruption, this COVID-19 pandemic, to work on becoming more sustainable, on improving management systems, on making production more resilient, and thus also more sustainable. And I think that is why during the pandemic, we all understood once more how interconnected this industry is and how much we depend on one another, how much we can learn from one another, and how important the exchange is. And I think we see that also today in this call and in this meeting, bringing together voices. We have Chinese overseas investors with factories here in China, with factories in different countries in Asia and in Africa. And this is also something very much at the heart of our Fabric project, as Mark Beckman mentioned in his opening speech, the idea that a lot of good practice solutions and experiences exist in Asia, but they are not always easy to find. And it's very, very important that we create the channels to make them easier to find and easier to access. And fora like this online seminar today are one example. But for that reason, our project also developed a new digital online platform for sustainability resources in the textile and garment industry to bring different stakeholder groups from across the globe together. It's called the Asia Garment Hub. It's already live. You can see it. It's www.asiagarmenthub.net. It's available in Mandarin and in many other Asian languages. And I would really like to encourage you all to check it out and engage actively so that we can learn from one another. And also, as we talked about several times today, we also see some good practice examples that were inspired by the pandemic, such as the Sustainable Terms of Trade initiative that was mentioned by Ms. Yan Yan from Syntec, the initiative of the STAR Network and further producing associations of the International Apparel Federation, in which Syntec is also playing a huge role, and which shows that crisis can also be a chance that we can use to join forces and to work together and address existing problems. Finally, once again, thank you very much to everybody here. And I would especially like to thank Syntec, our partner here in China, for the continuous and great collaboration and for conducting this study, which I think has helped us all understand better the local situation that Chinese overseas investors face in the pandemic and in general. And I very much look forward to the next step, to jointly developing, as we also heard today, further solutions and support offers that can help Chinese overseas investors make production more sustainable and improve all of our joint efforts. Thank you very much for joining us today in this room and online. Thank you for bearing with us. For those that had to leave early, we have a recording available. So thank you very much and stay well.
我们也可以持续关注GIZ 系列
And we will continue to pay attention to the online seminars organized by GIZ, focusing on the sustainable development of the textile industry around the world. Thank you very much.